The virtue most venerated in public is almost always the mask that most imprisons in private. You realize this when you notice that those who most preach justice, loyalty, and honesty are the first to manipulate in the shadows. The discomfort arises because from an early age, they were taught that playing fair would be enough to win, but reality doesn't respect this fable. Reality rewards those who understand that decisive moves don't happen amid applause, but in calculated silence, in a cold gesture no one dares to name. Stop playing fair, be ruthless is not an invitation to violence, but a warning. While you cling to the ideal of fair play, someone is silently redrawing the rules, leaving you trapped in a framework you didn't choose. The hidden mechanism is simple and brutal. Those who believe life is governed by explicit merit are led by those who control invisible narratives. The need for validation, the hunger for recognition, the hunger for public approval. These are the strings that turn you into a puppet. With every explanation, with every effort to appear coherent, you surrender a piece of power. And the irony is that you don't even notice the transfer because you believe you're simply being transparent. The truth is different. Any excess of clarity becomes ammunition in the hands of others. This is what Machiavelli insinuated when he stated that appearance matters more than essence, not because essence is worthless, but because few have eyes to see it. He who governs perceptions governs bodies. Have you ever noticed how innocence crumbles when someone who seemed upright receives credit that doesn't belong to them? The mistake is believing that justice imposes itself. No. Justice is narrative, and whoever frames the narrative determines who will be seen as the winner. The naive struggle to justify themselves. The implacable remain silent, observe, and utter the smallest sentence at the right moment, reorienting the entire field. The former believes that explaining oneself is proof of integrity. The latter knows that silence breeds mystery, and mystery transforms into aura. Aura weighs more than proof. Aura disarms testimony. Aura makes others defend you without you having to lift a finger. At work, you've witnessed this dynamic before. A colleague raises doubts about your proposal in public. The natural impulse is to immediately defend yourself, to launch into justifications, to prove your competence. But by doing so, you put yourself in the dock. The grim alternative is to refuse to play along. Pause, stare, and utter a short sentence. We'll see the results. You didn't deny it, didn't justify it, didn't diminish yourself. You shifted the pressure onto him because now the audience expects him to prove his insinuations. This silent shift is power. In relationships, the mechanism is even more cruel. The person testing your limits expects you to react, to argue, to explain. Every reaction fuels the game. The real break isn't raising your voice or imposing rules. It's the calibrated absence, the silence that effortlessly marks your territory. It's not about disappearing on impulse, but about being absent at the moment your presence was expected. This gesture undermines the other person from within, because no one can bear to feel like they've lost the center of gravity of the bond. Strategic indifference is the invisible knife that cuts without leaving a trace. In the digital realm, the court of public opinion moves at the speed of reaction. They attack you, expecting a retraction, an explanation, despair. The mistake is to rush. The dark response is slower and more lethal. You don't rush to delete, you don't rush to apologize. You blurt out something brief, out of place, that doesn't fit their frame. A slight irony, a sideways observation, and the attack loses substance, because the power lies not in denying the accusation, but in frustrating the expectation of your submission. Whoever sets the pace dictates the game. The tools are always discreet, almost invisible. Calibrated silence, which is not an escape but a blade. Calculated indifference, which is not disregard but sanction. Rarity, which is not a definitive absence but a precise dosage. Strategic disappearance, which is not abandonment but a rupture in a pattern. Each of these gestures cuts narratives, shifts expectations, and keeps you unreadable. The unreadable is untouchable. No one manipulates what they don't understand. This metamorphosis exacts a price. Strategic solitude, iron discipline over impulses, a refusal to fall into the trap of explanation. It requires enduring tension without giving in to the easy relief of defense. The gain is the invisible fortress. You become one who doesn't react reflexively, but responds calculatedly. With each choice, you reinforce the aura of one who cannot be conditioned. Aura is sovereignty. Aura is a presence that suffocates without words. The cycle is still just beginning. The discomfort you feel now is a warning that your instinct to play fair has been conditioned. But once you realize it, the transformation begins. Those willing to maintain silence have already begun to conquer the terrain others can't even see. And with each cool movement, each precise absence, you approach the point where ceasing to be predictable will become more natural than breathing. The second layer of this game reveals itself only when you accept a bitter truth. No one respects those who explain themselves too much. And from there, the path begins to open toward the next level of ruthlessness. The average player's most common weakness is believing they need to be understood. The desperate quest to be well interpreted is the vice that surrenders your weapons before the battle even begins. You feel the urge to explain every detail, to prove you're not guilty, to convince with lengthy arguments. But at that moment, you've already been framed. The enemy didn't need to win because you yourself opened the door. Dirty play was never about the truth, but about controlling the narrative. By playing fair, you condemn yourself to fight in arenas you didn't choose, with weapons that don't belong to you. The hidden mechanism becomes clearer when you observe the collective hunger for immediate answers. People demand positions, proof of alignment, gestures of submission to consensus. The rush to react becomes a leash. It is in this space that the relentless act. They don't deny, they don't explain, they don't plead. They simply suspend the response, leaving the air thin, forcing others to fill the void with their own anxieties. This void is the invisible trap. What for the innocent is uncomfortable silence, for the strategist is conquered territory, because the lack of reaction creates a vacuum that can only be filled with assumptions, and assumptions are always fragile. Machiavelli already suggested that one doesn't need to be good, just appear to be. The darkest secret is that appearance itself is shaped by contrast. Those who always justify themselves sound guilty. Those who always respond quickly sound insecure. Those who measure their words and choose when to speak become enigmas. Enigmas generate respect because the human mind fears what it cannot decipher. That's why your strength should not be arguments, but silence and presence. Silence is not the absence of voice, but rather control of the frame. Silence forces others to speak more, revealing their weaknesses. In the professional arena, imagine a meeting where you're the target of veiled attacks. The naive player struggles, trying to prove his competence. The ruthless player maintains his calm, observes the movements, and responds with few words, each one carrying weight. He doesn't try to erase every doubt cast against him. He lets the doubts float in the air until the attackers themselves sound insistent, almost paranoid. Silence turns the accuser into a hysteric, and the audience, which had previously been watching him, begins to see who truly lost control. Whoever appears calmer, more solid, always gains political credibility. In relationships, the game follows the same logic. Someone tries to provoke an emotional reaction in you. They expect to see anger, jealousy, insecurity. When they receive only a serene look and no response, they feel frustration gnaw at them. The person understands they don't have direct access to your strength. You don't expose yourself, you don't explain yourself, you don't plead. This cutoff creates the most lethal effect. The other person begins to circle around you, trying to decipher your silence. This is where the power shift arises. Those who appear predictable are manipulated. Those who remain unreadable become the center of gravity. In the digital environment, the dynamics are even faster. A public attack spreads in minutes. The instinct is to react, write lengthy denials, record explanatory videos. But every word fuels the court. The shadowy move is different. Controlling time, not reacting in the heat of the moment, letting the foam of the attack itself wear off. When the response comes, it is minimal, sharp, impossible to dispute. A short sentence can nullify 1,000 accusations because it doesn't provide material to prolong the fire. Silence followed by a surgical cut creates an aura of sovereignty, and sovereignty is always stronger than justification. The tools of this practice require discipline. Calibrated silence, which only works when you endure discomfort. Pause, which is not hesitation but mastery of rhythm. Calculated indifference, which doesn't break bonds but establishes invisible boundaries. Rarity, which transforms each appearance into an event. Strategic disappearance, which disarms expectations and repositions you as a central figure. The secret is not random absence, but chosen absence at the moment when others most desire your presence. This sudden cut is not escape, it is sanction. And silent sanction is the most painful of all because it cannot be debated. The metamorphosis begins when you accept that justice is not a guaranteed right, but a force field created by those who control perceptions. As long as you believe that being right is enough, you will be manipulated by those who understand that perceptions are worth more than facts. Real power arises when you refuse to be conditioned by others' expectations. This is where the ruthless differ from the naive. They don't struggle to be understood. They shape their own aura so that others react around them. It is at this moment that you cease to be a piece in the game and begin to become the board. The price is high. You lose the relief of being seen as good. You give up the comfort of being read immediately. You accept the loneliness of not being able to explain yourself. But the gain is non-negotiable. You become unreadable. And the unreadable cannot be imprisoned in narratives. The unreadable frightens, destabilizes, attracts and repels. The unreadable is the true seat of power. Those who refuse to surrender to reflection create an invisible fortress that cannot be taken. And yet this is only the second step, because being unreadable isn't enough. The next level requires using your presence lethally, without ever losing your inner control. The game deepens when your own aura becomes your most feared weapon. The cruelest paradox is that the more you try to show strength, the weaker you become. The need to prove dominance betrays neediness. True strength emerges when you feel no obligation to display it. This is the shadow few can bear. The awareness that power doesn't need a stage, only presence. While the naive flaunt and wear themselves out, the ruthless conserve energy, project mystery, and let the imagination of others work in their favor. Silence at this point ceases to be defense and becomes attack. Those who don't justify themselves force others to create stories, and the stories they create are always greater than any proof you could offer. The hidden mechanism here is the human reflex to fill in the blanks. The brain doesn't tolerate emptiness. It invents explanations, multiplies hypotheses, dramatizes intentions. If you remain silent, they speak for you. If you are absent, they justify your absence. If you don't reveal your plans, they create legends. Every gap becomes an aura. Aura isn't born from words, but from the space you don't fill. That's why the most calculating have always seemed shrouded in mystery. They aren't magicians. They simply resist the childish urge to explain every step. What sounds like arrogance to the weak, to outsiders, becomes silent power. At work, this logic manifests itself in negotiations and turf battles. Those who talk too much betray their cards. They reveal needs, urgencies, and limits. Those who speak little maintain room for maneuver. Silence leaves the other person exposed, guessing, trying to force a reaction. The meeting becomes a stage of imbalance. Those who maintain silence dominate the pace. Those who talk too much wear themselves out. It's in this space that you stop being just another employee and start being seen as a figure of importance, not because you shouted, but because you didn't give in to impulse. A heavy silence is remembered much more than frenetic speech. In the relational realm, the application is even more devastating. Have you ever noticed how emotional tests lose power when they don't receive a response? A provocation, an indirect comment, a dismissive gesture, all of this depends on reflex. Without reflex, the attempt dies. Frustration grows because the other realizes they don't have access to your inner self. It's at this point that you stop being manipulated and become feared. Not for what you do, but for what you don't allow them to do. Calculated absence is a punishment that cannot be challenged because there are no words to attack what isn't exposed. And inevitably, silence begins to shape behavior. The other adjusts to your rhythm. Power changes hands. In the digital environment, the principle takes on another layer. The speed of networks forces everyone to respond instantly. The relentless, on the other hand, choose their timing. Prolonged absence breeds speculation. A minimal response frustrates expectations. Irregularity creates unpredictability. Suddenly, everyone is watching your movements, even when you haven't posted anything. Absence transforms into expanded presence because scarcity increases value. While most drown in excess, you become rare. The rare will always be seen as valuable. The rare always defines the game. The tactical tools that sustain this level are refined. The precision cut, a short sentence that ends a discussion without allowing for a return. Mirroring, which returns the other person's own insecurity without compromising yourself. Redirection, which directs attention where you want it, allowing attacks to lose momentum. The pause, which turns each word you say into double weight. Disappearance, which shatters predictability and forces others to live in anticipation of your next move. It's not about doing more. It's about doing less with surgical intent. The minimum becomes the maximum when it's rare. The inner metamorphosis at this stage is clear. You don't move on impulse, but on calculation. You feel the urge to react, but you hold back. You sense the temptation to explain, but you remain silent. Each time you control your instinct, you strengthen your fortitude. The power here isn't shouting louder, but not being shaken when everyone else is shouting. The power is breathing deeply while the other despairs. The power is sustaining the void without rushing to fill it. Whoever endures the void controls the game, because the void is unbearable for the weak, but becomes the nourishment of the ruthless. The cost of this path cannot be ignored. You will be called cold, distant, insensitive. You will be criticized for not reacting, accused of arrogance. But understand, each accusation arises from the frustration of not being able to control you. Each label is a sign that your fortitude is working. Labels are the desperate reaction of those who have lost their access. What seems like condemnation is actually confirmation of sovereignty, and if you maintain silence, time works in your favor. Time always exposes those who shout too much. Time always strengthens those who remain immobile. The game now begins to take on a different tone. You already understand that not reacting is a weapon, that absence is presence, that silence is attack. But there's a deeper level, transforming your aura into absolute dominance. Being unreadable is already power. Being inevitable is even more so, and it's this transition that marks the next phase of relentlessness. The most uncomfortable thing is realizing that being correct never guaranteed victory. It only soothed fragile consciences. Reality rewards those who sustain tension without giving in. Playing fair is offering your own throat for others to decide whether or not they deserve to be cut. Playing ruthless is never exposing your throat, always staying half a step out of reach, so that no one can predict your next move. You don't need to be cruel in your gestures, just impenetrable in your posture. This is the point at which inner strength ceases to be a defense and becomes an invisible weapon. The hidden mechanism that governs this stage is predictability. The human mind becomes addicted to patterns because patterns offer control. Those who can predict you control you, and the greatest naivety is to believe that consistency is a virtue. Consistency, when exposed, becomes a prison. True power arises from calibrated unpredictability. It's not about acting crazy, but about never allowing anyone to read your inner rhythms. Today you respond, tomorrow you're silent. Today you appear, tomorrow you disappear. This irregularity destroys conditioning because it prevents us from making reliable predictions. The unpredictable is feared. The unpredictable commands respect. In the professional environment, the predictable is devoured. The employee who always reacts the same way loses value. The manager who consistently displays the same attitude is manipulated. The ruthless introduce small variations that confuse observers. An unexpected silence in a meeting. A striking presence in a moment that seemed irrelevant. A cold refusal when automatic agreement was expected. These ruptures don't go unnoticed. They put the environment on alert, and when everyone is on alert, you've already won, because the alert consumes their energy, while you conserve yours. In relationships, the unpredictable redefines the bond. The other person never knows if they'll have your presence, your words, or your attention. This uncertainty creates fascination and insecurity. Humans are attracted to what they can't control. You don't need to prove affection, just measure it. You don't need to argue, just interrupt the pattern at the right moment. A sudden withdrawal is more powerful than 1,000 explanations. A cold return weighs more heavily than warm justifications. This dynamic doesn't destroy bonds. It simply repositions them within its orbit. Whoever controls the cadence of the bond controls the bond itself. In the digital space, logic is amplified. Everyone displays routines, schedules, moods. Everyone is legible, predictable, controllable. The relentless deviate from this pattern. They don't follow the expected rhythm. They don't post at peak times. They don't repeat formats. They create doubt about the next step. This doubt is more valuable than any explanation, because while they're trying to guess you, they're already orbiting you. Uncertainty turns into dependence. They need to observe, they need to interpret, they need to wait. This is the greatest power, making everyone waste energy trying to decipher your aura, while you remain cold and calculated. The tools that sustain this level are even sharper. Silence, not just in moments of attack, but as a routine of presence. The long pause at critical moments, which transforms seconds into eternity. The sudden redirection of a conversation, which takes control from the other person. The precision cut, used not as defense, but as a definitive closure to narratives. The prolonged strategic disappearance, which forces others to recalibrate expectations. Each tool, used at the right time, transforms a minimal gesture into an overwhelming movement. The secret is not to get stuck in formulas. The secret is to vary with coolness. The inner metamorphosis at this stage is no longer just resistance, but active mastery. You don't react, you dictate rhythms. You don't respond, you lead. Your focus shifts from surviving the game to reconfiguring it. This is the moment when you realize the difference between the strong and the sovereign. The strong endure, the sovereign creates tension. The discipline here is to not succumb to the temptation of being read, of being explained, of being understood. Each time you sustain the unreadable, you reinforce your aura. And aura isn't imposed with effort, it's only cultivated in rarefaction. The cost, inevitably, is strategic solitude. You won't be close to many, because excessive proximity destroys aura. You won't have easy confessions because secrets are weapons. You won't allow yourself to be transparent, because transparency invites manipulation. But in exchange, you'll gain something few touch, the feeling of being at the center of the game without ever being reduced to a pawn. Isolation isn't a loss, it's a throne. Those who sit on it know they pay with silence, but they reap sovereignty. This is the territory where the shadow takes hold. You are no longer the one who reacts, nor the one who merely resists. You are the one who dictates the pace, the one who destabilizes by the simple fact of existing illegibly. And yet, there is still a final layer, the stage where the doubt sown at the beginning finds its definitive resolution, where the cycle closes and relentlessness becomes absolute presence. The doubt that gnawed at you from the beginning now finds its way. Playing fair was never a virtue, it was conditioning. While you believed justice was enough, others shaped perceptions and reaped victories in silence. The discomfort was wondering if being ruthless would be a betrayal of one's own essence. But the answer reveals itself. Ruthlessness is not evil, it is sovereignty. It is the breaking of the invisible leash that forced you to explain yourself, to justify yourself, to submit. The price of remaining naive is being eternally manipulated. The price of being ruthless is enduring strategic loneliness. Between the two, only one offers true freedom. The hidden mechanism, ultimately, is that of legitimization. The masses don't follow those who shout the loudest, but those who stand the test of time. Those who remain silent when everyone else despairs. Those who don't chase approval, but make it chase them. This inversion is the core of the darkest power. You don't need to convince, you just need to exist, illegible and inevitable. The presence that doesn't bow becomes a reference, even if it's hated, even if it's feared. And in this paradox lies the hardest lesson. Being loved is fragile, being respected is unbreakable. In professional arenas, you now see the whole game. Those who struggle to defend every detail never rise. Those who remain silent, who cut things short, who let time do its work, accumulate invisible authority. Political credibility is not gained by explanations, but by aura. Aura doesn't defend itself, it asserts itself through the contrast between calm and chaos. When chaos dominates the room, your serenity becomes power. Silence weighs more than any speech. Those who understand this cease to be employees and become untouchable references. In relationships, the same thing happens. The other person no longer controls you with emotional bait. The game of provocation loses strength because you don't react. The punishment isn't yelling, but withdrawing. It's not arguing, but denying access. This silent absence reshapes behaviors. You don't need to ask for anything, because the void it leaves speaks louder than explicit demands. What was once a terrain of manipulation becomes a field of your sovereignty. You're no longer tested in the same way because the other person has learned. The price of trying to control you is always losing more. In the digital space, the final dynamic is clear. Collective haste turns into weakness. The relentless, silent, and infrequent individual becomes noticed precisely because they don't play the same game. With each strategic absence, their presence expands. With each minimal response, their value grows. When they decide to speak, attention is already guaranteed. The predictability that imprisons others doesn't touch them. They become the exception, and the exception is always the true power because it redefines the entire framework. The tools in this final stage are no longer just techniques, but ingrained reflexes. Silence is natural, not effortful. The pause is instinct, not calculation. The surgical cut comes as a breath, not a rehearsal. Rarity imposes itself without planning, because there is no longer any anxiety about exposure. You become absolute presence, precisely because you don't overextend yourself. This naturalness is the definitive proof that the metamorphosis is complete. What was once tactical is now natural. What was once discipline is now identity. Your inner strength consolidates. You no longer feel the need for approval because you recognize the game as an illusion. You no longer seek to be read because you understand that being unreadable is the true throne. You no longer fear solitude because you understand that it is the price of sovereignty. And in this clarity, the initial doubt finally dissolves. The problem was never being good. It was being predictable. The mistake was never having virtues. It was trying to display them like trophies. The darkest power has always been in control of your own reflection. By stopping playing fair, you no longer become a traitor to yourself. You become whole. The closing echoes. The world has always rewarded the ruthless, even if secretly. History doesn't celebrate those who explained themselves, but those who shaped perceptions. Society doesn't protect those who seek fairness, but rather those who maintain an aura of inevitability. You now understand, fair play was just a narrative to keep many submissive. The ruthless game is the raw reality of those who refuse to be manipulated. This is the lesson that spans the centuries. Presence without submission, silence as a weapon, aura as a throne. This is the final pact. If you understand, engrave in yourself the phrase that seals this dark cycle. My relentlessness is my invisible shield.